You're welcome back to the conversation in News Central Television. It's now time for us to switch gears to Zimbabwe, where President Emerson Mnangagwa, in a recent address during a congratulatory business dinner organized by business leaders in Zimbabwe, vehemently denied allegations of rigging the August harmonized elections. He claimed that his victory was earned through 5 years of hard work and not electoral manipulation. The president emphasized that both his government and the assembled business leaders were in their position due to merit, not election-related improprieties. Looking ahead, he planned to continue implementing pro-business policies aimed at fostering a conducive environment for increased production and further reducing the cost of doing business in Zimbabwe. Now, joining me this evening for this discussion is promised Mkwananzi, National Spokesperson, Citizen Coalition for Change in Zimbabwe, and also Youngerson Matete, Director of Project Vote in Zimbabwe. Warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me on the program. Now, I'd like to start with you. You're welcome. I'd like to start with you, Youngerson. President Mnangagwa stated that he won the August elections on merit. What do you make of this statement, and does it correspond with the general verdict from observers, international observers and local observers on the conduct of the elections? And can you also delve into the specific factors or achievements that he claimed contributed to his victory in the first 5 years, which he said, it was done through hard work?
I must start by, I think I'll rephrase your statement. I'll start by saying that maybe the proper phrase is that Mr. Mnangagwa should say that he rigged the elections through merit or unmerit. But maybe I want to replace the word win with rig, because, the 2023 and 24th elections in Zimbabwe have been declared by all observers locally, regionally, international as free, as unfree and unfair, in the basis that they do not meet the constitutional demand of our country, the regional and international instrument that governs or provide guidelines for free and fair elections. They violated a lot of provisions of constitutions. So I would want to start by saying, or answering the question that Mr. Mnangagwa says that he won the elections free and fair, but I would rather rephrase and say Mr. Mnangagwa should just say he rigged the elections, as he had admitted when he was having a business breakfast in Victoria Falls, when he was meeting heads of businesses, when he said that he rigged elections, but being a CEO is not easy because he can't rig. But be that as it may, one thing that I want to indicate is that when you talk about merit, that yes, achieved over the last 5 years, I want to say that Zimbabwe is over 90% of unemployment rate. It is second in the world in terms of inflation. The cost of living in Zimbabwe is very high. When Mr. Mnangagwa came to power via coup in 2017, civil servants were earning an equivalent of $500. Now they are earning less than $30. The standards of living is very poor. The healthcare system has been broken down. The corruption level has increased. Human rights abuses have increased. So this is the record of Mr. Mnangagwa, that when you talk about merit, that's what he should be talking about. I don't know if it amounts to be a merit or not, but this is what Mr. Mnangagwa's record speaks for. He is a man that is known, that has never delivered in his capacity since he joined the government since 1980. He has always been failing as a man, and his government, he is a man that believes in tribalism, is a man that believes in clansmanship. So his government is an incompetent government that is made up of his relatives, his sons, his nephews, his nieces, his concubines, and a whole lot of stuff. So Mr. Mnangagwa cannot talk about merit or deliverance when you're talking about governance. He is an epitome of aristocracy, bad governance, and a whole lot of stuff that can describe a government that is failing. Zimbabwe, as of now, is ranked, like I said, number 2 outside Venezuela, as country that is have the highest inflation, most unhappy country. People are suffering on the ground. Everyone has become a vendor. Graduates are now going to sit selling bananas, selling airtimes, because there's no employment. So Mr. Mnangagwa cannot talk about delivery, cannot talk about merit. But what he did during this 23rd to 24th election that the whole world saw is that he rigged the elections. And even in the rigging, he actually failed because he rigged in an amarage manner that has never been seen in the history of electoral rigging across the world. That everyone could see that people were not allowed to vote. So even when he tried to rig, he could not rig on merit. So I can't, like I said, I can't say put merit, winning or rigging in the same sentence when I'm describing Mr. Mnangagwa.
Now, Youngerson, the ZANU-PF and President Mnangagwa will definitely disagree with you on that submission. The president did mention that his pro-business policies, he mentioned pro-business policies as being a contributory factor in his getting re-elected. Can you detail the specific policies and their impact on various sectors of the Zimbabwean economy? And are there any criticism or concerns associated with them from your perspective as a Zimbabwean citizen?
So, like I mentioned, that Mr. Mnangagwa is a man who believes in classmanship, tribalism, that even when you talk about business, you talk about governance, he's just talking about his inner circle, his families, his friends. So when you talk about his pro-business policies, there's nothing like that. He has been awarding and rewarding all his cronies with government tenders without even following due procedure. There's no meaningful investment that has been happening in Zimbabwe for the last 5 years that we can talk about, except those that were coming from his cronies, his friends, that are directly linked to him. You know, just to point one thing that Al Jazeera, which is an international news network that is based in Dubai, produced a 4-series document that linked Mr. Mnangagwa as a money launderer in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa through his family, through his friends, through his wife, and his international business persons who are connected to him. So we can no longer talk about the pro-business policies in Zimbabwe that are actually connected, that actually inspires or attracts investors. There is no investor that is attracted in a country that willingly violates the constitution,
No,
that willingly violates
okay,
the rights.
Youngerson, before I move to our next guest, I want you to take, I want you to respond to this because you said, you know, you didn't see any good thing in terms of business that the ZANU-PF government and President Mnangagwa has done. But now, to what extent have the policies led to a shift towards locally manufactured goods? Mr. Mnangagwa said locally manufactured goods now occupy 85% of supermarket space. They used to be empty and a lot were imported. How sustainable is this trend? And don't you see it as a bright spot?
I think for a country like Zimbabwe, which is now a spaza shop for South African commodities, it defies logic that what Mr. Mnangagwa is saying that local manufactured goods. Let me tell you, illustrate further situation in Zimbabwe that even a toothpick we import it from China, from South Africa. There's nothing like local manufactured goods in Zimbabwe. We're a spaza shop for South African manufactured goods. There's no many industry that is operating in Zimbabwe. All the companies or industry has closed. Cisco Steel, Shaban Mine that used to produce asbestos, they've closed. The only company that are operating are the ones that are mining raw materials that are owned by Chinese, which are his friends, and that are looting and sending raw materials out of the country. So we can never talk about locally manufactured goods in Zimbabwe. Actually, as far as shop for South Africa, that's why we actually have the highest unemployment rate. Because if it was the case that we are manufacturing locally, we would have been consuming some of our locally graduates, but we can't because our economy doesn't manufacture.
Thank you very much. Youngerson, I'd like to bring our second guest into the conversation. Promise Mkwananzi, national spokesperson of the Citizen Coalition for Change, Triple C Party in Zimbabwe. One welcome to you, Promise, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Chief.
Now, Promise, your party, Triple C, is the major political opposition party in Zimbabwe. How do you respond, or what were your initial thoughts when you heard the president speak and say that he won the August election on merit? What do you make of this, and what's the Triple C's official position on this issue?
Well, Triple C's official position is that the elections that were conducted in Zimbabwe were a nullity, and this position is supported by the Southern African Development Commission, by the African Union, by the Carter Center, and many other observer missions that came into Zimbabwe. There was consensus that the elections in Zimbabwe did not meet the standards of a free and fair election. And we have come to the conclusion that there must be a fresh election, a free and fair election supervised by the Southern African Development Community in order to produce a leader in Zimbabwe who is not disputed, who enjoys the full legitimacy and endorsement of the people of Zimbabwe.
Now, Promise, beyond SADC and the African Union and international observers, what were your own personal observations on of the elections, and what evidence do you have to prove that these elections were indeed not free, fair, and credible?
Well, there is insurmountable evidence on the ground of the fact that the elections were not credible. You did see that there was, as a good example, the state media was very partisan. We had no access. Our candidate, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, had no access to state media. Our parliamentary candidates had no access to state media. More than 100 of our rallies were disallowed by the police, as opposed to 0 that were there was a use of the traditional leaders to marshal voters to go and vote for a particular political party, and many others. Indeed, the ballot papers, for example, in Harare, where it is perceived that it is our stronghold, only arrived almost 12 hours after the time that they were supposed to arrive, and our people had to vote well into the night. This was also a machination to try and undermine or sabotage the strongholds that are perceived to be the strongholds of the opposition, the Citizens Coalition for Change.
Thank you, Promise. Now, back to Youngerson. Could you provide a detailed analysis of are there any improvements in the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe, including key indicators and areas that require attention?
I must start by highlighting that Zimbabwe is suffering because of the political crisis that emanates from disputed elections, each and every election cycle. So one thing that inspires business is a political leadership that is chosen by the people. So Zimbabwe has had a political crisis since 1980. This elections in Zimbabwe has been disputed since then. So what we are currently witnessing is that because there's issues to do with election disputes, there is no attraction to investment, there's no attraction. Even the local people in Zimbabwe does not have confidence in our government, in our political system. So I really cannot talk about policies or any step that can attract investors. And we are actually suffering from bad governance. That even recently, the government of Zimbabwe, as soon as they assumed or they've been inaugurated themselves, they moved on to declare that sovereign wealth fund is now directly administered by the president through what they called the Mtapa state investment, the stripping the state investment and making them personal. So all these things that does not inspire confidence in the eyes of investors. And we have had a lot of issues that has to do with lack of respect to property rights in Zimbabwe. And these things have been continuously going on. So investors have continuously shunned Zimbabwe because of that, because of political crisis, because of lack of rule of law, lack of respect to human rights. We have a lot of political prisoners in Zimbabwe, including Job Scala, Jacob Ngarifume, who are all opposition political leaders. We have been incarcerated for quite a long time. Those who are not outside the walls of prison are being accused of one crime or another. So all those things are continuously repel investors, because investors want to invest or come to a country that has got a rule of law that is stable, that has got respect the constitution. So all those things we do not have as a country. And the parliament that is supposed to be another arm of the government is continually captured and has been rendered functional with the recalling of around 15 or more members of parliament and senators in the recent week. So what it now means is that that's captured
Okay.
are dysfunctional that even
Thank you very much, Youngerson. I'd like to bring back Promise into the conversation as we begin to wrap up this program. Promise, what's the current state? I do believe that some litigation was put up. The CCC went to court to dispute the elections, the presidential elections in Zimbabwe. What's the status of that? And are you hopeful that justice will be served? And also looking ahead, what specific policy measures or initiatives would you recommend to further advance economic development and ensure political stability in Zimbabwe?
Well, as you know, we didn't go to court this time around to contest the presidential election, so there is no court case to look up to in as far as the presidential election is concerned.
And what's the reason? What's the reason for not going to court?
Well, we have said that the courts, we went to court in 2018, and the decision of the court was quite predictable. And we knew that this time around, the court was actually waiting for us, and it would have been an additional endorsement to Mr. Mnangagwa rather than a fair assessment by the court of whether or not the elections were free and fair. Just before elections, the judges were given $400,000 each, which had nothing.
Hello, Promise Mkwananzi, are you there? We seem to have lost audio connection with our guest, but we've fast run out of time on the program. Promise Mkwananzi, National Spokesperson, Citizen Coalition for Change Zimbabwe, and also Youngerson Matete, Director of Project Vote Zimbabwe. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the program. I do appreciate your contribution and your time.